This morning we have a lot of experts here for you. We know that we've had a couple of rains so far and have been pretty fortunate in Ventura County, but we want to make sure that you have all the information you need to make sure that if we do get hit hard, that we are as prepared as we can be to protect those slopes. A lot of our communities, particularly in Oak Park and Thousand Oaks, are surrounded by these wonderful hills of open space. A lot of those hills now have all been charred, so we need to do what we can to make sure and protect our property, but most importantly also protect our lives. So we have before you this morning all the experts in the county of Ventura. We've got experts from the state of California and also from the federal government, as well as folks from the city of Thousand Oaks. We have the public works director of both the city of Thousand Oaks and the county of Ventura. So with that, I'm going to introduce our Public Works Director, and that is Jeff Pratt. If you'd like to come on up here, and then we'll begin the parade of experts and information. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Supervisor. I'm going to be brief. My part of this is just giving you some logistics and telling you how this is going to go today. Thank you all for being here. What you're going to get that the latecomers won't get is a real inside look at what we're doing and what for you, and then what you're going to need to do for yourself. Well, obviously, we can't all be everywhere at all times, so but we're going to do the best we can to handle some of the big stuff, and you're going to hear more about that from the presenters that are coming. I want to thank a number of people for being here, but most notably FEMA. I'm sure you all have a lot of questions for them. As they said, we're going to talk a lot about what we're doing, what we've done, give you a status report to date, and then what you need to do for yourself. And with that, I'm going to turn it all over to the Sheriff's Office of Emergency Services and Kevin McGowan. Thanks for being here, Kevin.
Thank you, Jeff. As Jeff said, my name is Kevin McGowan. I'm with the Ventura County Sheriff's Office of Emergency Services. We're an organization that helps coordinate and support response and recovery efforts for incidents and large-scale disasters. Up on the PowerPoint, this first slide is a map. We call it the Fire Progression Map. It's created by the incident management team that was here during the fire. And just to orient you a little bit to the map, the solid line that kind of runs across the middle of it is the 101 freeway. And so everything north of the 101 freeway in the burn area is kind of split between LA County and Ventura County, and that's the north half of the Woolsey fire. And then everything to the south of that line that's running parallel to the screen is the south branch of the fire. And the majority of that's actually in the LA County side. And this is going to be important, the mapping component of what I discussed, because it gives context to the different impacts that we're going to see from winter weather events and how they interact with the fire perimeter and the burn area. So the main thing I want to discuss today with everyone is the enhanced or increased threat and risk that are posed by post-burn area scars. And there's a couple of components to it, and I'm going to try not to get too scientific, but there's a big group of people that come together to assess the hazard that we all are facing now. And that consists of engineers, hydrologists, meteorologists, emergency managers, public safety officials from fire and law enforcement and EMS, and a whole slew of other people. And they make up a core group, and they come from all levels of government, local, so that we can bring a lot of local institutional knowledge to it, but it also is comprised of state and federal partners also. NRCS, we had a BEAR team, a Burn Area Emergency Response Team, which is a federal team. And then we also had a state team, the WERT, it's the Watershed Emergency Response Team. And then we had a local team. And we go through all of the burn area and look at a couple of different components of the burn. And part of it's the burn severity. So how severe was the fire in a specific geographical area? How hot did it burn? What did it do to the vegetation in that area? And what did it change chemically with the soil and the geological components of the area? And when we go through that assessment, we're looking at that component. We're also looking at the terrain. So how big is the watershed? What's the surface area of that watershed? And then what's the steepness and the elevation associated with that? And as all of you as residents of this area, and I'm a resident right down the street here too, we all know this area is really diverse. The slopes and the hills that you see in one area are not like what you see in a different area. So if you're in Oak Park, what you experience in a watershed is much different than if you're on the south coast of PCH on the Ventura County side, like Yerba Buena area. The geological formation there is much different. It's much rockier. It has the ability to produce different types of debris flows than what you're going to see in like a sandier soil area. And so Thousand Oaks, Oak Park, Westlake, they're all different. So we go out there and we look and try and assess what those different issues could be. And the picture up to the left kind of explains in basic terms what a debris flow is. This says mud flow. We try and stay away from mud flow, but generally speaking, you have intense rainfall rates. So it's different than a flood that you would see, say, like from a hurricane, like Hurricane Harvey, where you have this really prolonged rain that overtakes like the water drainage system, and then you just get this like flooding situation. And some of that, the reason why I bring it up is sometimes that's like a static issue. Unless you're in the waterways where it's moving really rapidly, it can just kind of sit there and in a bowl and be stagnant. Debris flows are much different. They're very fast. They come out of nowhere. They're highly unpredictable. They're similar to other geological hazards that we face, like landslides, where there's really no accurate way to predict when and where a debris flow is going to occur. However, we do have some forecasting tools that give us the ability to get ahead of it, and one of those is a rainfall intensity. The picture on the left, what's it showing is that it's a diagram of an intense rainfall rate that's occurring on the top of a watershed, and then that intensity starts mobilizing the soil. And then when the soil is mobilized, it starts picking up debris. So at the most like microscopic level, if you think about it, if you take your hose and turn it on full and you don't have a nozzle and you just shot it right at the dirt, you'll see dirt just start splattering everywhere, and it's erosion. Same thing with intensity from the rainfall. So now we've cleared out all of our vegetation from the fire. It's been denuded. So water impact to the soil is direct now. There's no trees or brush to stop those water impacts. So we get erosion, and it mobilizes the soil. In a first-year burn area, we're looking at like 1/2 inch per hour rates or the derivative of that. So it doesn't have to necessarily be a rainfall rate that is over an entire hour at a 1/2 inch rate. It could be a really short, intense rainfall rate in, say, a 1/2 hour, which would be 0.25. So we use 0.5 is a standard that's established by the United States Geological Survey. And this diagram depicts that intensity, and it depicts the soil mobilizing and then picking up the debris as it's going down that watershed. And then everything in its way is in that hazard area. And then the picture to the right is a picture of what we call the hydrophobic layer. So this is a piece of soil that we went to a burn area and we kind of cut it out and we pick it up. And if you can see, there's a black or a dark brown layer, and that's the hydrophobic layer. And what happens is all the vegetation burns. It creates like a byproduct, a waxy byproduct that seeps into the topsoil of the ground. And then it also is, when it's burning really hot, it can change kind of the chemical composition of what's in that soil. And it creates this hydrophobic layer, which acts as a sheeting agent for the water. So you get water impacts on that, and the water can't penetrate into the soil like it normally does. And it kind of it reminds me of like slip and slide, like a plastic slip and slide where water's just sheeting off of it. And so it's able to create more erosion and really speed up the water flow that you won't traditionally have if you didn't have a burn area. So this is a map of potential debris flow risk for the entire burn area, and it's derived from a couple of sources. Up at the top I put on the slide burn severity. This isn't the actual burn severity map. The burn severity map drives the data for this. And so all of those teams that go out there are not just supported by their own experience and observations. We have a lot of scientific data that we're feeding into modeling. And that comes from a variety of sources. It comes from aerial imagery, some of which is called LiDAR. It also comes from just different modeling equations from past debris flow experiences. And we take all of this information, and one of the products we create collectively is this hazard map. And the hazard map depicts a couple of different things. One is the lighter the color is the lower probability of a significant or like a life safety type debris flow occurring at that point of origin. So I want to be clear that the map doesn't show where a debris flow is going. It shows where an origin point could be if it received that debris flow intensity rainfall rate. So we talked a little bit about a ½ inch per hour. So if any one of those points received a ½ inch per hour, or the derivative of that intensity of rain, it could produce a debris flow. And then the gradient of colors is red being the worst type of debris flow, so, or the higher probability of it being a life-threatening type debris flow. So as you can see, most of the red areas are south of the 101 freeway towards the ocean. So it's like the south coast side of the burn area. And that makes sense because it's a larger watershed, there's steeper mountains, the type of geological formation that's down there. And then everything above the 101 freeway is in that kind of tan and yellowish gold color. So the threat is not as prominent in those areas, but there's still a threat. So we take all that information that I was talking about, those field observations, these mapping products, these modeling, and then we do additional modeling. And this map depicts what the state team does, which this is a product the WERT team creates, and it's called the Values at Risk map. And all of those little yellow dots are different values in there. I'll kind of define what that term is, that they've established to be potentially at risk of being impacted by a debris flow. And those values range from like a roadway or a drainage system that if it got clogged by a debris flow could impact the roadway, all the way to a house that could potentially be destroyed or damaged from a debris flow. So I just wanted to share that map with everyone to show that everywhere within the burn area, there's a lot of values at risk. But we want to distill that down even further, because it's definitely challenging if drainage systems get clogged by debris, but that's not necessarily like a life safety issue. So how we respond to those types of debris flows is different than how we're going to respond to a debris flow where there's life safety issues. So we start developing all these products to develop an informed decision-making process for us to evaluate the risk of a debris flow and then what emergency actions we're going to take. So this map is where we come to for that emergency action perspective. So this product is developed by our county public works agency, and we use a couple of different modeling systems, and then we start looking at where the potential areas of risk are. So not that point of origin where the debris flow would start, but where downstream is it going to be impacting. And I think at this point it's just important for me to mention again, debris flows are unpredictable. Well, they're also not easily identified the pathway of where they're going to go. So things can change the trajectory of a debris flow. And we've seen this in a bunch of different debris flows. Cam Springs had a debris flow back in 2015. They had two. And the Montecito debris flow. Areas that initially were like flood areas that were a part of the FEMA flood mapping might not have been impacted by the debris flow because the course was altered by some kind of, structure or watershed system. So it's just important to know that it's not a perfect science, that there's a lot of unknowns related to debris flows. But we stretch as far as we possibly can in taking all of this scientific information into account for then to come to what we consider the most important part, which is protecting life. So life is always our number one priority, and it's no different with the debris flow threat. And we take these models, we take all of this information, and then we start formulating what we consider emergency protective measures for all of the residents and businesses and schools and everyone that's within that potential hazard area. And what we do is we develop potential evacuation areas and then a model or a decision-making process on when we would execute those. When I mentioned that the debris flow threshold that USGS states is 0.5 inches per hour, that's the beginning of when you start seeing that mobilization of a product. And this storm that we had this past week was actually a great indicator of what we're going to kind of see in our watershed in the Woolsey fire, because we had a couple of areas that were right above the 0.5 inch per hour. We got some areas that got 0.6 inches per hour, and we saw some movement. We saw some products that were mobilized on the south coast, and we got some very minor debris flows and rock falls. But it responded the way that we thought it was going to respond. And I wanted to provide that context because not everything's a Montecito event. And I think that all of us live post-Montecito debris flow understand how significant and tragic that event was. But not all events, if you get to a 0.5 inch per hour rate, are going to yield a Montecito type debris flow. So just to give some context, the Montecito event, they experienced over 1 inch of rain in 15 minutes. And their watershed that they're dealing with in those canyons is orders of magnitude larger than the watersheds we're dealing with in the Woolsey fire. So they had 1 inch in less than 15 minutes. I think some report I saw was 0.75 in 5 minutes. So they had really significant, I mean, that goes beyond, just to give perspective, if you were driving in that type of rain, you would literally have to pull your car over because you couldn't see. Your windshield wipers wouldn't keep up with that level of rainfall. You would pull over because you would just be in whiteout conditions. So we experienced similar rainfall intensity on the night of the Camarillo Springs debris flow. So we were over 1.28 inches in a 1 hour rainfall rate. So the intensity that mobilizes that much product is pretty high. So our perspective is not to evacuate people every time we get a forecast that there's a 0.5 inch per hour rainfall rate, because evacuations are very disruptive to our lives and the impacts to our schools and businesses. So we try and balance as best we can public safety and prioritizing life safety with disruptions and the disruptive nature of evacuations and everything that comes with evacuations. So when a storm comes, we're evaluating if we're going to be in that 0.5 inch per hour rate, and we're trying to assess with our weather partners at the National Weather Service and Public Works Agency how we can evaluate all of that stuff, and then we'll take action if it warrants the need for evacuations. And that's usually when we start getting above that 0.5 range for sustained periods of time. And then our main mechanisms to communicate with everyone is going to be through VC Alert. And so everyone can sign up for that by going to vcalert.org. As the information is being produced, we'll put it up on vcemergency.com. And that's the website I'm pretty sure everyone became familiar with during the fire, because it's our main disaster website for the county. And it's non-jurisdictional. So if you live in Thousand Oaks or a city within Ventura County, we put all that information. All the school district information usually is on there, or we point to the school district website. And then the last thing I would just encourage everyone to do is have personal preparedness stuff in place. So one thing we realized with this last storm, which it's with every storm, is that the forecast initially was a prolonged amount of rain, but that we were going to be below debris flow thresholds. And then this cell popped up off of the Channel Islands around 4 in the morning. And you don't have much time when a storm cell is off of the Channel Islands and then is going to be hitting the coast within an hour or 2 hours. And I'm sure everyone here got the National Weather Service alert for the flash flood warning. I think it came out around like 8-ish in the morning. So there's a lot of dynamics that go into, weather forecasting and timeliness. So our perspective is have your disaster kit ready. Be prepared that you might have to evacuate on short notice. Our commitment to you is that we'll try and provide as much time as possible to give you evacuation notices so that we're not doing no-notice evacuations. And then lastly, sometimes shelter in place is the best course of action. So I don't want you to be shocked or surprised if you get a shelter in place notification, because evacuating isn't always the best course of action in debris flows. If we've already had like a lot of sustained rain that is already having impacts on like road networks, the last thing we want to do is put you out on the road where the debris flow is going to find you. It might be better to stay in your residence and find like the safest room. So if you are in the Midwest and you're in Tornado Alley, you go into a bathroom that doesn't have windows. So you might get alerts from us on these no-notice type events where a cell storm shows up with no pre-knowledge and is going to have impacts within an hour or two. The message from the National Weather Service or the Office of Emergency Services might be to shelter in place. So we encourage you to heed those warnings. So when there's an evacuation order issued, we take it very seriously. We don't issue those just willy-nilly. So heed the warnings. And then if it's a shelter in place, shelter in place. And then the last thing, and I brought this up at the town hall we did here the other week, was we know you know your community better than any of us. Where we issue these alerts are usually at command posts or the emergency operations center. And our main goal, and our goal here today, is to arm you with as much information that you can have to make good decisions too. And so don't feel that you only have to act when you're hearing an action from us. If there's rain coming and you don't feel comfortable at your house because you live behind a hill and there's a bunch of rocks up on top of that hill, I encourage you during those heavy rain events to go get a hotel or stay with a family member or leave that area during that rainstorm. It's totally cool to do that. We always support people using this information to take good, protective actions that they decide themselves. But when you do hear the evacuation order or the shelter-in-place order from the sheriff's office, you need to heed the warning, because our experience has been that debris flows, they're deadly. No one here is outrunning a debris flow. They usually run about 35 miles an hour, so they're consequential. And I think Trabuco Canyon there's a video of a debris flow that went through Trabuco Canyon on this storm that we just had, and it kind of shows you the significance of that, the power that Mother Nature wields with debris flows. So with that, thank you very much for your time, and I'm happy to introduce Glenn Shepard, our Director for the Watershed Protection District for Ventura County Public Works.
Good morning. Glenn Shepard, Ventura County Public Works Watershed Protection. And with respect to debris flow, Kevin gave a great overview of what it is, but in the context of what it really means, we think of it in terms of bulking, right? There's added debris in clear water that used to not be there. And in your neighborhoods and throughout the county, there are drainages that already exist. And so this bulking is really what heightens the risk. And bulking, if you had a clear glass of water and you dumped a bunch of ice in it, you could, if it was halfway full and you dumped ice in it, you could get it so it overflows the glass. And so conceptually, that's the issue why we're having this discussion and trying to provide this level of preparedness and talk about this heightened risk. Just wanted to highlight on this particular slide, Kevin talked about the thresholds. And so here are the U.S. Geological Service thresholds for burned areas, and there's the 1 hour at 0.5. And you can see thresholds by minute as they had described it. Kevin talked an overview, but I wanted to highlight with respect to emergency response and what's happening real time in the back of the Sheriff's Office of Emergency Services during an event. I'm going to step through what's happening in the back and then get to the products that are available to you as the public that you can help inform. And as Kevin talked about, you making your informed decisions on whether or not you need to evacuate or not. I'm going to show you a website that provides real-time information with respect to rainfall intensity, and stream gauging. But this slide just highlights the aspect of who's in Kevin's Emergency Operations Center during an event and the level of expertise that is there producing these products and looking at forecasts in the future. So this is a public-facing website. This is our flood warning system within the county, and this is a nationally renowned program that is available to all, and the website is there. But what's interesting here, this particular slide shows the constellation of rain gauges, and these rain gauges will show the intensity levels every 2 minutes, updated every 2 minutes, and with the burn thresholds already identified, and will trip and turn red on the mapping. So this, I won't go into the detail, but we can show you on a laptop over here how it works, but you can drill down to each one of these rain gauges and open it up, and it will list what's occurring and update it every 2 minutes at each particular location. This is where the value of the prediction analysis that occurs within the Sheriff's OES. This is our stream gauge plotting, and what's interesting on this particular slide is you have rainfall intensities, actual and predicted up at the top. This particular branch is the South Branch of Arroyo Conejo, and this is located just upstream of Ventura Park roadway. And so this is the stream flow, actual in blue, and this is the rainfall that's occurring. And what you don't see is if there are any forecasted rain out here, it would show up in red. But the modeling aspects with respect to the stream are also updated every 4 hours during a storm event. And so we would see the response of that particular creek and that stream gauge at that location during an event. And it goes into assisting Kevin and the sheriff on going through their protocols on establishing whether or not to shelter in place or what the evacuation protocol might be for a particular area. And at this point, that's what I had to talk about for our the emergency response and the detail that goes behind the products that you will be seeing and that are available to you. I'm going to turn it over to the City of Thousand Oaks and its Public Works Director, Jay Spurgeon.
Good morning, and thank you all for being here. We appreciate you taking the time out of your Saturday morning to learn more about how to be prepared for hopefully there won't be major rainstorms and flood events like Glenn was sharing with you. But overall in Ventura County from these two fires, there were over 100 homes severely damaged and or destroyed. And if any of you are here today, I can only imagine the devastation of having that happen to you, or if you know friends or you have neighbors. But there's hundreds more properties that are adjacent to the burned out open space areas now. and the concerns about having excess debris or mud or just storm runoff enter your property from these burned out open space areas is real. And your concerns are real, and we understand that. And part of our goal today, this morning, is to help inform you and provide you with some tools to help prepare yourself. Because ultimately, you need to be prepared. You need to think about your own property and how you can place sandbags or other kinds of measures to divert any kind of flood or debris or mud flows that might enter your property around your home. That's the most efficient, the most effective, the most cost-effective way. That is what our experts tell us, whether it's federal or state or county, hydrologists and fire recovery experts. Please, if you take anything away from this morning's workshop, that be it, and that you need to be prepared. You need to think about what you can do yourself to protect your property. These conditions and the concerns about mud and debris flows from heavy rainstorms will persist for a number of years. As the watersheds recover, it could take several years, it could take 3 years, it could take 5 years. Some of the watersheds in the Springs Fire area, out above Camarillo Springs and Dos Fianos, are even just now really recovering, and it's been 5 years. So this is, kind of a long-term-ish phenomenon. And again, those concerns we understand are real, but we need to be realistic about it. There is a frequently asked questions worksheet that's available over at the city table. Please make yourself available of that. It asks and answers a number of questions that we're hearing from residents. We have a list of online resources, websites. Some of these are at the table. There's also a list of contacts for, if you're in the city of Thousand Oaks, there's a list of contact departments and staff who can help you work out your preparedness plan and or recovery, rebuilding if in fact you've had serious damage or your homes were destroyed. But the one that I really want to make sure you get a hold of is this one here, which is the Homeowner's Guide for Flood, Debris, and Erosion Control. So we have plenty of these over here. So please pick one up. We also have them in Spanish. This is a very practical, hands-on, how to do it guide, again, to protect your property, to figure out the best way that if you're concerned about debris and mud flow entering your property, your backyard typically, with a burned out watershed above you, to create a diversion, again, to get those flows around your home and out into the street where the city and the county public works folks can take care of that. So we can clean it up out there. The open space that burned in the city of Thousand Oaks, it's several thousand acres at least, and of course many, many more acres in the rest of Ventura and LA County. This is, in Thousand Oaks, it's publicly owned open space. And that area is protected under state law in its unimproved and natural condition. And again, as the experts have told us, to spend the effort and expense, which would be considerable, to go up into those watersheds and create debris catchments, check dams, even hydroseeding, has very minimal impact. In other words, if we get a rainstorm like what Kevin McGowan was talking about, there's really no holding it back. And so again, the most effective and obviously the measures that you have control over as a property owner are to look at your property and create diversions for this material to be diverted around your property. So again, that's what we encourage you to do, and we have some information and guidance to help you with that. So lastly, I would like to also mention that I wanted to give you the list of sandbags, and I'll just flip through it. Where sandbags are available, because these are the types of devices that we can't read that, but I'll tell you where they are. At all the fire stations, so that's easy. If you, there are fillable sandbags and sand supplies at all county fire stations. So you can go and fill them yourself and take them home. We also have filled sandbags for City of Thousand Oaks residents available at no charge at our Municipal Service Center, which is located at 1993 Rancho Caneo Boulevard, and also at our main Grant Brimhall Library, 1401 East Jans Road. We have supplies there. We stock them continually, but they are available while supplies last. But so far we've given out from the City of Thousand Oaks over 7,000 sandbags. So a lot of folks are making use of those, that resource, so that's good to know. For county folks, you can get filled sandbags at the Satacoy Public Works Yard, and to some, well, I'll just leave it at that because I know that's true. Again, at all fire stations, they're also available if you want to fill them yourselves. Thank you very much. And back to Jeff for the question and answer period. Thanks again for coming.
Great. So I'm going to summarize very quickly what the speaker said, and by that I mean I'm going to underline some things that I think you're going to want to take away. If you do nothing else, if you remember nothing else about this, you know, one of the most important things I think is if you aren't already, register for VC Alert. And those notifications go out like 7 or 8 different ways, and you're going to want to hear it. A Go Kit, you heard about that. If you're living next to the perimeter of the fire and you're in danger of being evacuated, especially if you're in one of those orange areas, and even if you're not, you should have a Go Kit just ready to throw it in the car or have it in the car, jump in the car and be ready to go quickly. And the most important website, if you remember no other website than this one, you want to remember VenturaCountyRecovers.org. That's the mothership, if you will, and it points at everything else. Everything that's over here, a lot of the stuff that's outside, you can find directions to on that website. And I want to talk about flood insurance quickly. We focused on what you can do to prepare for yourself. That's the part of the workshop, or that's what the purpose of this workshop was. And it's not like we're not doing anything. We're up in the watersheds right now trying to assess whether or not it's appropriate to build check dams or debris basins. And if we find that it is, we will be doing that. And typically, there are grant monies available for that will pay for that. But what you can do and there's a long lead time on that. And the reason that we do it at all is because these watersheds are going to take several years to recover. And every rainy season, there's going to be a certain amount of risk, although it will reduce over time, assuming there are no more fires. So we're going to be looking at the big stuff. You got to look at the little stuff. And if you're on the perimeter of the fire, or if you're in a place where you think flows might affect you, something that's important to know is that you can buy flood insurance, even if you're not in the floodplain, and it's at a very reasonable price. And that flood insurance covers the debris flows if you actually happen to be hit by debris flows. And this has happened a number of times in Ventura County over the years I've worked here, where something's jumped the channel, moved, and gone through homes. And it's an ugly job trying to get 2 or 3 feet of mud out of your house over time, and it's very expensive. So you can buy flood insurance. It takes 30 days to activate. A lot of the FEMA folks are here. You can get more detailed questions answered by them. But you're going to want to look at that. One other thing, we have, the Public Works Agency has something for an app for your cell phone. It's called VCPWA Connect. And all you need to do is take a picture of something you think might be a problem or that needs to be addressed, or something you can be our eyes in the field. When you do that, it sends your request straight to the person who's going to be handling it, and you will get a response on how it's been dispensed with. If it got routed to others or if we took care of it, we'll let you know. So again, go kit, vcalert.org, VenturaCountyRecovers.org. That's the most important thing to remember. Check the flood insurance. We'll be looking at the big stuff. And I'm going to open it up to questions. I'm going to ask Glenn, Jay, and Kevin to come back up here, supervisor, to help out with this. Oh, filled sandbags. Supervisor?
So in the Oak Park community, I just want to let you know, the Rancho Simi Rec and Park District did say that you can get filled sandbags. We'll have a location for filled sandbags in Oak Park, and that will be at Deer Hill Park. And I also wanted to let you know that I know Jeff mentioned about United Policyholders. This is a service that is available to you to help you negotiate with your insurance company, and it gets you so you can ask the right questions and you can get the information that you need and make sure that you can get the best from your insurance companies. So with that, go ahead and we'll start answering some of the questions that you've written. And our first is Glenn Shepard with our Watershed Protection District.
Good morning again. I have a couple questions on this one card. Does the county have a plan in place to wash away the layers of dried mud and dirt after large debris has been removed from roadways in particular? The issue is really centered around dust. We don't necessarily have a plan for that. As we saw in the Thomas Fire, rains that came later in the season tended to take care of the roadway and the dried dirt on the roadways. Second question, do we have a sandbag placement tip? So again, Jay Spurgeon indicated that we have these books over here in Spanish and in English. So I take some for your neighbors. We have plenty. In here is some really good tips on how to do it. Out in the pavilion outside, we have experts out there with some other types of products outside of sandbags, but can help with erosion control tips and or other placement opportunities. And then the last question, plastic white sandbags will get destroyed and we'll end up in the ocean. So again, if you're placing sandbags, let's be responsible if they start to fail. And it indicated in this question, the white sandbags particularly don't last more beyond a season. The yellow sandbags typically last up to about 3 years. So if they're destroyed, let's be a good neighbor and pick up your destroyed plastic sandbags and dispose of them and move the sand into your garden, etc. Those are my set of questions. Over to Kevin.
So one of the questions was related to information that was presented today, if it will be available electronically. And yes, the answer will be, one, we're recording the presentations today. We also have the slideshow will be hosted on VenturaCountyRecovers.org. One thing we've heard from the community is we give out a lot of websites and it can be overwhelming. So we're really trying to point people in two different directions, and then they can use those two websites to go to other websites. So one being vcemergency.com. That's for when there's an event taking place. So that's an emergency/disaster website for real-time incident-related information. And then VenturaCountyRecovers.org. And that website is in, it's like a joint participation with the city of Thousand Oaks and the county and the unincorporated areas. So everyone can go to the VenturaCountyRecovers.org website, and we'll have these slideshows and the presentation available there at a later time. Another set of questions was related to the maps. We'll have the maps there too, so people can access the maps. Where do we go from here? And what does the next 12 to 24 months look like? A lot of that's based on what our rain is going to be. So we've been in a persistent drought for 6-7 years. And the challenge with that is we really don't know long-term what our winter season's going to look like. We could have above average rainfall rates. We could have below average rainfall rates. The one thing I will say that we see every year is we see at least a couple of storms, if not a half a dozen of storms, that have intensity. So we live in that kind of a climate where even if we're not having substantial rainfall totals throughout the season, we'll get one or two storms that produce really significant rainfall rates. And during my previous presentation, I had mentioned that we're really not concerned about those long-term rainfall. That's a flood issue, and we'll have information related to that. But the debris flow threat is that short rainfall intensity that causes that to occur. So even if we don't have a significant rainfall rate for the entire season, we still have the potential for those intense storms. And so Jay Spurgeon had also mentioned this is a persistent problem that takes years and years for it to recover. So Camarillo Springs fire, the Springs fire took place in 2013. The debris flow that happened in Camarillo Springs was in 2015. It was actually almost 2.5 years from when the fire occurred. Now, there was a really big drought year in one of those years, so we stayed at first-year burn levels for about 2.5 years. And it wasn't until a year later that we got into like a second-year burn area. And the reason why we talk about first year, second year, third year is that raises the rainfall intensity. So the Thomas Fire burn area from the Thomas Fire last December, it's in a second-year burn area. The last winter season we had, they had enough rainfall that there's some regrowth and revegetation occurring. There's some soil stability occurring. So with that, we're at a different debris flow threshold. The USGS is right around 0.0 or 0.8 inches per hour rate in a second-year burn area. So if we get good rain like we had the last couple weeks where we get these nice light storms, that's a good thing. It can help us recover quicker. There's nothing that says that by the end of this winter season we're not in a second or even a third-year burn rate based on the revegetation and regrowth. So we'll continue to work with the community throughout the next 5 years to address that problem. There's a couple of questions. I'll just consolidate them into one related to what you can do next with your property. That's what after is about and not the presentations. We have contractors and private sector organizations here to help you address your property. It doesn't really make sense in a big forum to talk because everyone's property is going to be unique. If you live right up to a hill, you're going to have different issues than if you live 5 streets away, but there's a big drain inlet or something in your area. So really encourage you to stay after these presentations and talk with the private sector or all of the participants on the presentation side. We'll have booths here for Q&A. How far from Chesborough and Palacamada open space area might debris flow travel? That goes back to what I was saying earlier. There isn't a definite science related to debris flow like where debris flows go, how far they travel. I will say they're correlated with the intensity of the rain. So Montecito traveled the entire range from the mountains to the Pacific Ocean. So over 5 miles of distance. That was a very significant debris flow that mobilized. I would just be guessing how much material actually mobilized. There's stats out there on the hundreds of thousands of dump trucks that were used to haul out all of the material. That's related to the storm intensity, how much water, and then the actual watershed that was being impacted. So right now I don't have any information related to specifics on Chesborough or Palacamada as far as if you got a 2-inch rainstorm in 15 minutes, how much material would be mobilized. We do that in real time though. So when a significant storm is forecasted, the Ventura County Emergency Operations Center activates. We bring in representatives from the National Weather Service, our Public Works and Watershed Protection District, all of our public safety agencies, and we start real-time contingency planning. And we go through the maps that we just looked at that have values at risk, and we start identifying based on that storm trajectory and rainfall rates what kind of protective actions will be taken. And we'll look at where we think the debris flow flood path will be, and we'll put those under evacuation orders and display that on the map. So that will give you some indication of the perspective that we're looking at as far as the significance of the debris flow. And that is all the questions I had, Jay.
So a question about the open space, and specifically in the city of Thousand Oaks, open space is managed by the Caneo Open Space Conservancy Agency, COSCA. And the question is about mitigating, placing remediation measures up in the slopes in the open space area. And as I mentioned earlier, state law actually precludes us from making improvements in publicly owned, protected, natural open space. But not only that, it is very ineffective to do so. And in many ways, going up into the recovering watersheds to place those kinds of devices, whether they're check dams, debris dams, the fiber rolls, erosion protection of those kind of things, actually damages the watershed and can make a potential debris flow situation worse. So certainly in Thousand Oaks, and I believe even in the county unincorporated area, that we will not be placing any improvements of those natures in the open space. So again, one of the takeaways this morning is be prepared and use the resources that we have available to you in order to divert any kind of mud, debris, or excess runoff around your homes out to the street. Thank you.
Last question, and I'm back. So this question really highlights kind of why we're here. The question of, hey, is sandbags really going to help my house where we have a big debris flow? And what about K-rails? What about other products? Well, we have vendors and experts outside that can help with some of these very property-specific questions that you have. And that's a lot, that's what needs to occur next, is these individual discussions about what's occurring. And I know K-rails are being deployed. And the storm that we just had was telltale. As Kevin McGowan indicated, we hit thresholds for debris flow, and we saw some issues in some of the drainages, right? So now we are being informed. And it reminds me of being in the service where you establish a fighting position, or if you go camping, you set up your initial camping spot. If you arrive late, you get the tent up. Well, the next day you improve it. And so we need to learn from each successive rain event and just start improving. And if you tried sandbags and it didn't work, then we need to keep evaluating and make improvements on your particular property situation. And as Jay Spurgeon mentioned, it's about diverting the flow around your house and protecting the property.